Come join me on my second channel, Jaguar Gator 8, where we'll talk all things college football. New video drops every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch the latest video. And now, on with our feature presentation. There are many reasons why a player might want to get drafted to a particular team, and I'd be here all day if I listed every single one of them. There's the idea of being able to play for a winner. There's the idea of being able to play close to your family, or in your hometown, or in an environment that you're comfortable in. There's the idea of being able to play for your favorite team, or to play with one of your friends, or to play with a legend and learn from the best, or anything along those lines. However, one of the most common reasons given is that by going to this team, the player believes that they have a chance to compete. They believe that they have a chance to contribute and have a chance to make an impact going forward and make the roster. Now, there is a right way to express this belief to the public, and there is a wrong way. The right way, usually, is to say something along the lines of, I'm going to try and earn my spot and compete and show the coaching staff that I belong in the league. Or if you want to get a bit bolder, even something along the lines of, I'm going to make sure that they can't take me off the field. Having confidence in yourself and a belief in yourself is one thing, and I'm not going to fault a player for that if they're speaking in general terms and not comparing themselves to other players. However, the wrong way is to say that you're happy to be drafted by that team because you're guaranteed to get playing time because everyone else on the roster at your position group sucks. Usually, saying something like that is frowned upon, and it's generally not going to be a good move. But in 1996, one member of the New Orleans Saints, upon getting drafted, did not get the memo. This is Oregon running back Ricky Whittle, and after being chosen by New Orleans, he said something that raised quite a few eyebrows because of how bold and how gutsy it was. And as you probably guessed by the title of this video, it did not work. Not at all. In fact, it backfired in hilarious fashion. This is the story behind one of the stupidest draft moments in the over half-century-long history of the New Orleans Saints franchise. Before I talk about the actual incident in question involving Ricky Whittle, which was only the second most baffling draft-related incident done by the Saints in the 1990s with a running back whose first name was Ricky and whose last name started with the letter W, we need some context to understand just who Ricky Whittle was, and why the Saints wanted to draft him. From 1994 to 95, Oregon had arguably their most successful two-year stretch in program history at the time. In 1994, they made it to the Rose Bowl for the second time ever, and for the first time since 1957, and they finished the season ranked number 11 in the AP poll. They followed that up in 1995 with another 9-win season, with another top 20 ranking in the AP poll, and with an appearance in the Cotton Bowl. Not only did the two 9-win seasons tie a program record for most wins in a season, but it was the first time ever that Oregon won 9 games in back-to-back years. Considering the fact that Oregon had one finish inside the top 2 of the Pac-8 and Pac-10 from 1971 to 93, the fact that they went first in 1994 and second in 1995 was really good, and a pleasant change of pace for Ducks fans. And while there were many reasons for their success, perhaps no one player was more instrumental in their success during the mid-90s than the man you've been watching this whole time. This is running back Ricky Whittle, and in 1994, the man scored 9 touchdowns, 8 of which came on the ground, while averaging 4.7 yards per carry. The 9 touchdowns ranked 4th in the entire conference, and ranked 2nd on the entire team. However, it was the 1995 season where he really made his presence felt in the college football world, because after head coach Rick Brooks left the team to become the head coach of the St. Louis Rams, when Mike Bellotti became the new man in charge, Whittle's role increased tenfold, not just in the running game, but in the receiving game as well. The rushing numbers were really good, as he set a career high in rushing yards with 1,021 yards, and set a career high in rushing touchdowns with 12. He finished that season 3rd in the conference in rushing yards and 2nd in rushing touchdowns. And his rushing yardage total was so good and so unprecedented in school history that at the time, his 1,021 rushing yards was the 3rd highest total in school history in a single season, only behind Bobby Moore, who had 1,211 yards in 1971, and Derek Lavelle, who had 1,202 yards in 1988. But what really attracted people to Ricky Whittle was his ability in the receiving game, because he was seen as somewhat of a dual threat. During the 1995 season, he had 55 receptions for 437 yards, finishing 4th in the conference in receiving yards, and 1st in the conference in this category amongst all running backs. This meant that by the end of the season, Whittle had 1,458 yards from scrimmage, which ranked 3rd in the Pac-10, and he had 13 touchdowns from scrimmage, which ranked 2nd. He actually set the school record that season for the most usage in a single season at 334 touches, which is a record that still holds up today. And because of his great play over the course of his collegiate career, especially during the 1995 season, he's remembered today very fondly, winning tons of accolades and etching his name in a large chunk of the record book. Here are just some of the highlights of how his legacy with Oregon is today. Whittle was named the MVP of the team in 1995. During the 1995 season, he was named a second-team All-American by the Associated Press, becoming the first running back since Mel Renfro all the way back in 1963 to receive first or second-team All-American honors. As a side note, to learn more about the career of legendary Hall of Famer Mel Renfro and the bizarre story involving his draft status with the Dallas Cowboys, click the card in the upper right corner. By the time his career ended, he had 2,545 career rushing yards, which was the third most in program history. He had 7 games in conference play with at least 100 rushing yards, which tied the school record. And when you combine his kick return yardage from the 1995 season, where he had 477 yards, finishing 4th in the conference in kickoff return yards and 3rd in yards per return, he had 1,935 all-purpose yards, which back in 1995 was the school record. He also had 4,488 all-purpose yards over his entire career, which was 3rd in school history by the time he graduated. To make a long story short, Ricky Whittle was really good, and it was very clear that entering the 1996 NFL Draft, Whittle was going to get chosen at some point. This draft projection by the San Francisco Examiner had Whittle as one of the top 15 running backs, and had him projected as a 4th-round pick. And according to Whittle's agent, Mike Sullivan, he was projected to go somewhere between round 3 and round 6, so right in line with what the publications were saying. Sure enough, in the 4th round, with the New Orleans Saints on the clock at pick number 103, they called up Whittle and asked him if he wanted to come down. The Saints had not spent a draft pick yet on offense, as their first 3 selections in Oregon defensive back Alex Molden, California defensive back Gerard Cherry, and Colorado State defensive end Brady Smith were all on the defensive side of the ball. And the Saints needed to bolster their running game, as they ranked 28th in a 30-team league in rushing yards and 24th in yards per carry, with no player running for over 1,000 yards during the 1995 season. This seemed like an incredibly logical pick. It filled a need, and seemed like it lined up with the consensus board. But with Ricky Whittle now on the Saints, he was asked about what it was like to realize his NFL dream. And his response was, well, it could have been a whole lot better. I'll put it that way. Whittle was really excited to be playing for the Saints, aside from the fact that this was the realization of his NFL dream, as he could now officially say that he was playing in the National Football League and was grateful to be chosen by a team early in the 4th round. Playing for the Saints meant that he'd be playing alongside one of his best friends in cornerback Alex Molden, who went to Oregon and was drafted in the 1st round. As Whittle said on being drafted by the Saints of all teams, "This is a great opportunity for me, and I get to be roommates again with Alex. The odds of us being drafted by the same team must have been 1 in a million. That's not how math works at all. Assuming you were both locks to be drafted, which you were, it doesn't really matter where the first player winds up as long as you're both playing on the same team. And since there are 30 teams in the NFL, doing very basic math, the odds of you two being on the same team were 1 in 30, or a bit above 3%. Slim for sure, but definitely not 1 in a million. However, I'll give him a pass. He's clearly excited to be playing with his friend, so as funny as this is, I'm not going to blame him for not thinking the math through and running the probabilities in his head. It was what he said next that was the real head-scratching moment. Because when talking about why he was excited to come to New Orleans, he said, and I quote, "They don't have any legitimate back who can catch the ball." Let me repeat that. They don't have any legitimate back who can catch the ball. Now, if this was Whittle saying that Coach Morris said that they don't have a legitimate back who can catch the ball, and they're looking for him to fill that role, that's one thing. But nope, Whittle never prefaced the quote like that, so this quote was entirely Whittle's own doing. In his eyes, every halfback on the Saints was bad, and none of them could catch the football. Seems like an awfully bold and, quite frankly, stupid thing to say for a 4th-round pick who just got drafted by the team and still has to prove himself. There are a few reasons why this quote makes no sense, and is utterly moronic. Number one is that, well, this wasn't entirely true. In fact, it wasn't even close to true. The year before, in 1995, running back Derek Brown had 35 receptions, so he was averaging over 2 catches per game. He also had 44 receptions during the 1994 season, so over the past 2 seasons, Brown had 79 catches and caught 75% of the passes thrown his way. For some perspective on where his 1994 season ranked in the NFL, where he caught over 77.2% of his passes on 44 catches, if you looked at every running back in the league that year to catch at least 77% of his passes and have 44 receptions, the list is highly exclusive and consists of just 4 players. You had Johnny Bailey of the Los Angeles Rams, Emmitt Smith of the Dallas Cowboys, Amp Lee of the Minnesota Vikings, and sure enough, Derek Brown of the New Orleans Saints. Not that this quote wasn't stupid to begin with, but from a statistical standpoint, the Saints literally had one of the best receiving backs in the NFL on their team in terms of a guy who would get opportunities to catch the ball and would make the most of those opportunities. Furthermore, of those 4 guys that qualified, here's how they all ranked in yards per reception. As you can see, the leader in the clubhouse, and by quite a lot, was none other than Derek Brown. So it's not even like you can say he put up empty numbers from a reception standpoint, because Brown averaged 9.7 yards per catch, which was nearly a full yard above Johnny Bailey, a yard and a half above Amp Lee, and roughly 3 yards above Emmitt Smith. Saying that the Saints don't have a legitimate back who can catch the ball, when they literally had one of the best in the game at doing it by every metric, is absurd. At least if you're going to have the audacity to say something like this, for starters, make sure it's accurate information. Number 2, and perhaps most obvious, saying that none of your teammates in the running back room are legitimately good, and that none of them can catch the ball, is not a good move. I don't even know if Whittle watched any Saints games, as he was not a Saints fan growing up. He was born in California, went to high school in California, and went to college at Oregon, so he spent his whole life on the West Coast. They had one nationally televised game throughout all of 1995, which was a 34-26 victory against the Carolina Panthers on Sunday Night Football. So unless he had Sunday Ticket, which was in its infancy back then, there was no way he was able to watch any game but that out in Oregon. And if that was the one game he hypothetically watched, that was New Orleans' best game of the season from a running standpoint, as they had a season-high 180 yards, with a dagger being a 35-yard touchdown late in the 4th quarter by Derek Brown. So clearly, you couldn't base that opinion off of that game. But even if we disregard that, and even if the Saints went the entire season without having a running back catch a pass, you are a rookie. You have not proven anything yet. You have not played a game yet. And here you are, bashing your own teammates before even meeting them, and bashing your teammates who have actually played in the NFL, some for a significant time, and have been able to make a good career out of it from a length and a monetary standpoint, by calling them illegitimate and by saying they can't catch the ball. There are significantly better ways to say that you expect to contribute to the team without throwing every other running back on your team under the world's fastest moving bus. You could say that you're going to compete and earn a spot in the offense and become the pass catching back on 3rd down. You could say that you're hoping to make an impact right away and show the Saints why they made the right call and why other teams are going to regret passing on you. Heck, if you said the exact same quote, but just prefaced it by saying, Jim Morris said when he called me up that they want me because right now they don't have any legitimate back who can catch the ball, I've got no problem with that whatsoever. I don't think anyone's got a problem with that. But to say this, to say that every other halfback on the team was not legitimate and couldn't catch the ball, that's probably a bad move. In fact, that's probably the worst thing you could say in that situation. But hey, maybe Whittle could stick it to all those illegitimate halfbacks and go on to have a successful career in the NFL, where he establishes himself as one of the best receiving backs of all time, transforming the position in ways we haven't seen before. Or he could last one season, fail to score a single touchdown, get cut during the preseason in 1997, and only play 1 year in the NFL while having 26 career receptions. Guess which one happened? There's a reason you're not seeing any highlights of Ricky Whittle during his time in New Orleans, and that's because, well, there's no footage available anywhere online. Finding footage of Whittle in a Saints uniform is as hard as finding Whittle's brain cells when he made that aforementioned comment, because they're non-existent. To make matters even funnier, in 1996, there were 144 players in the NFL to have at least 25 receptions, with Ricky Whittle being one of them. If you looked at everyone's yards per catch average, Whittle ranked 140th out of 144. He's 5th from the bottom with a mere 6.2 yards per catch, or a full 3.5 yards worse per catch than the illegitimate Derek Brown had in 1994. I've talked about puzzling comments made by running backs at the draft before, where they say something moronic moments after being chosen, only to have it blow up in their face in spectacular fashion. If you want to learn more about that, in particular, the time that Cedric Cobbs compared himself to 4 of the greatest running backs of all time and proceeded to score 0 touchdowns himself, click the card in the upper right corner. But this might have been even worse. At least when Cobbs did it, he didn't put down teammates Corey Dillon and Kevin Falk in the process. I can't say the same about Ricky Whittle. So what's the moral of the story here? When you get drafted, don't put down your new teammates by saying that they can't catch the ball and that they're not legitimate. Even if you genuinely believe that, some things are better left unsaid. Come up with literally any other reason as to why you're excited to be playing in the NFL with that team. Otherwise, you're going to look like an idiot, especially if your NFL career goes up in smoke and is worse in every way, shape, and form than the illegitimate running backs you compared yourself to. Ricky Whittle had a fantastic college career at Oregon, but when it came to his first impression in the NFL, he got a whittle too ahead of himself. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.